Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 600 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back for the 600th time as we break down everything that happened over the last week across NXT and AEW. That's right, it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. NXT is 2 weeks out from Battleground, AEW about a month away from Forbidden Door, and there were a ton of newsworthy developments across both shows this week. Because of that, let's not waste any time off the top. Allow the Silver King to remind you, probably for the 1200th time, that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating. On Apple, take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. And it's also where you can send in questions and comments for the show that we will do our best to read on air as applicable. You can submit last word questions over there as well. Again, at Getting Overcast on Twitter. And please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Over head. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to Raw, NXT Dynamite, and SmackDown, along with exclusive news posts every single Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Now, as mentioned, a ton happened across NXT and AEW this week. This was, by the way, I should mention, the Fallout episode of AEW Dynamite coming out of AEW Double or Nothing. So, like I said, a lot of stuff to discuss. We're going to kick it off as we usually do with NXT. AEW will be the second half of the show. As always, there will be timestamps in the episode description, so you can jump around if you so choose. But as always, I hope you listen to the entire show. Now, when it comes to NXT, this was probably one of the most unhinged, what do the kids say these days? Out of pocket? One of the most out of pocket episodes of wrestling TV I have seen in quite some time. If you missed this and you normally wait to listen to our recaps before deciding whether to watch, I almost suggest pausing the show, watching the episode, and then coming back to our recap. That's how wild it was. Let's just get right into it. Roxanne Perez hit the ring in the middle of the show to learn her challenger at Battleground. She said she's the only woman in WWE who has appreciated the NXT title since the start, and she never cared about Raw or SmackDown, only NXT. That doesn't exactly track with her being angry that she wasn't drafted recently, but I digress. Roxy said it was disrespectful to learn about her opponent this way and demanded Ava give her an answer. All of a sudden, Jordynne frickin' Grace popped up carrying the TNA Knockouts title. She got TNA and holy shit chants from the crowd. This was an excellent surprise moment. Grace put Perez over for building the foundation of NXT, just like she has in TNA, but Jordynne said she's built hers to last, and now she wants both titles at Battleground. Incredible surprise. Not sure why Ava needed to talk to Nick Aldis about this, which is what she said last week, that had us speculating it would be a SmackDown superstar. I thought maybe Candice LeRae, maybe Indy Hartwell, most likely Tegan Nox. But this is even better than any of those three. Grace was nails during the Royal Rumble appearance. This is the perfect crossover to get some added attention on Battleground. Plus, I'm not going to call this a dream match, but it is a hell of a booking that totally came out of nowhere. It does feel like Jordynne's probably going to wind up in WWE once her TNA contract eventually expires. That's going to be at some point in 2025. Maybe this is how she gets to dip her toe in and see if she likes it. There was a report out there that she's getting 6 figures for 3 appearances. I guess this week NXT, next week NXT, and then NXT Battleground. We'll talk about what's happening next week in a moment. So that's pretty good for a chunk of change for 3 appearances. And you're generally not going to pay someone that kind of money unless you're saying, hey, there's more where that came from. And therefore, I would expect her, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see her in WWE in about a year's time. Either way, this match, when we get it at Battleground, is going to be an absolute
banger.
And it should probably main event the show. It's one thing to have Jordynne in the Royal Rumble. Letting a non-WWE talent challenge for a WWE title is absolutely crazy given the company's history. I tried to research it and look it up. There wasn't anything that was easy for me to access in terms of that. I'm really going to have to go digging because I'm curious. The last time this happened, I would think it was during the NWA invasion of Raw back like 30 years ago. But I don't even know if that ever happened where one of those people challenged for a title. Maybe someone from ECW when they did their invasion before WWE bought them. I don't know, but it's unique. That's pretty much what I'm trying to say. Now, Ava opened the show in the ring, putting over the great NXT women's division before introducing Sexy Red, the rapper. Booker T completely lost his shit. She had American flag gear on. She immediately twerked in the ring. It's almost like her twerking is like spamming a finisher in a video game, where if she doesn't know what else to do, she just automatically twerks. So Sexy Red announced that she's going to be hosting NXT Battleground in Las Vegas, also wild. And then she unveiled the Women's North American Championship, which seemed to me to be a little bit more rounded than the men. And it's a obviously white strap because all women's titles in WWE have white straps, but with a red background instead of it being a maroon strap, I believe with a black background for the men. Tatum Paxley snuck into the ring and started doing a tug of war with Red over the belt before Michin ran in for the save. This was unhinged. Everyone handled themselves well. It was just wild to witness this happening in NXT. I actually thought Red would have had a bit more presence than she did on the mic, but it was nevertheless a fun start to the show. The title looks good. Now, I would have preferred them do something a little bit different than the Red, which, if we're being honest, makes it look pretty close to the Raw Women's Championship. Maybe they could have done maroon in the background. So to keep within the theme of the North American title, maybe they could have gone with a mauve type of color. That way you get a purplish hue. So it's not pink. Obviously, you don't want that for women. But it's also not maroon, which is, I don't think it's a manly color necessarily. But if you're trying to think of like, if maroon was for a man, what would be the female equivalent? Perhaps mauve. I don't know. I just think they could have done something different and more unique to make it stand out, because what's so cool about the North American Championship for the men is it stands out from every single title on the entire roster. This just kind of looks like another women's title. That said, it still looks really good. It just doesn't stand out, and that's why it's disappointing to me. So we had Michin against Tatum. This was the first of two North American Championship ladder match qualifiers on the show. Jada Parker came out for commentary. There was a fun spot where Paxley went Matrix style to avoid Michin. She caught herself in the ropes like Andrade. Michin countered a pump handle with an inside cradle, then hit Eat Defeat and got the win. I know folks are all about Tatum of late, and she's doing extremely well. We've been putting her over right here on the podcast. I badly wanted Michin in this match. Paxley is fine doing her thing without a title right now. She can challenge for this when someone wins it. The next year is about developing her into a legitimate champion. You don't need to do it right off the bat right away. Michin is too talented and too experienced to be sitting on the sidelines, which is what she's largely been doing since she returned to WWE. Her stewardship is really going to come in handy during this ladder match, even if she doesn't win, though I honestly would not be against her winning. I think I mentioned this when they talked about all the qualifier matches. Keith Lee being North American champion, her being able to be the first women's North American champion, that would be a pretty cool bit of symmetry there. She also deserves an opportunity to kind of lead a division or do something like that. Again, she's really good in the ring. She's solid on the mic, good character work, and she was really popular in NXT. So I know there's a lot of younger women in the match, and I'm sure when it comes down to our ultimate preview next week, I'll wind up picking one of them instead of her. I'm just saying, if I had the book, I might actually have Michin win this match and then just have someone else beat her for the title in like 60 days. The second match was Kalani Jordan against Ren Sinclair. Fallon Henley came out for commentary on this one. These two put on a bit of a clinic just with counters and reversals. Unfortunately, they botched the bridge break, but Kalani seemed to barely get her shoulder up, so it was okay. She came back with the split leg moonsault and got the win. This was far too short given both of their talent levels. I wanted to see them go here. It's been kind of weird with Sinclair in that they brought her in and she had talent and experience on the independents. And because of that, they put her on TV right away. but they have not given her a shred of momentum. She's also had like 6 different types of ring gear, so you can't even get a consistent visual of her, which isn't great. Kalani was the expected winner anyway, just because she's been featured more recently. Obviously, she was in the Iron Survivor Challenge back, I think it was in December. Kalani getting the win, therefore, was not a surprise. I just would like to see Ren get some additional opportunities. You know what's really cool, though? You know what? Let me double check this as I'm saying. I want to just look at the list. Yeah, so there are 6 women in this ladder match. 5 of them are black women. That's got to be a first in WWE for a multi-person match like this. Now, hopefully this is something that like does not need to be noted in the future because it just becomes a regular occurrence as the roster continues to get more diverse and talented and interesting. But man, that is a really cool note. 5 black women in a 6-woman match on a premium live event. That just simply hasn't happened before in WWE. I found that to be interesting. Now, Stevie Turner, you may remember her, returned to NXT by storming into Ava's office complaining that she's been busting her ass in the Performance Center, yet didn't get a chance at the Combine and didn't get a chance in the North American Championship qualifying tournament, despite others getting chances they don't deserve, including Jordynne Grace, who walked right into NXT and is now getting a title match with Roxanne Perez. She also pointed out that Dante Chen got opportunities because Mr. Stone was there. So Grace confronted her, saying she wants to introduce the NXT audience to herself anyway, so they should just fight next week. Turner seemed concerned. Ava was into it and booked the match. Now, Stevie's been out for a while, man. I know she's been on Level Up recently, but outside of like a random Battle Royal appearance in January, she had not been on NXT television in 16 months after tearing her ACL. If you remember, she came in doing that streamer gimmick during NXT 2.0. That's how long ago was the last time we actually saw Stevie Turner as a character on TV. I remember her being talented, so it's nice to see her back in the mix. She looked a little bit different than when she left, but it's been more than a year, obviously, so that makes sense. So we're going to get this match next week, Grace against Turner, and then Grace against Perez at NXT Battleground. Now, if you think Jordynne Grace and Sexy Red and Stevie Turner is a lot, let me keep going here. We had a scheduled match, Trick Williams and Javon Evans against Gallus. Joe Coffey backstage was upset learning that Ava barred whoever is not competing from ringside for the match. Metaphor came up accusing them of attacking Noam Dar. They denied it, got pissed, and left. Oro Mensah and Jakara Jackson insisted it must have been Trick, with Lash Legend again denying that's the case. We later saw Mensah having been attacked, selling a shoulder injury, with it again, at least for me as a viewer, appearing to be fake. The faces dapped up while training. They put together a game plan for the match. Then Sexy Red popped in, twerked, dapped them up, and then walked them out of the room. Later, we saw Legend and Jackson kind of commiserating over Mensah's injury, with Lash promising to talk to Trick and confirm it's not him. Red entered with Trick for the match. She twerked her ass off throughout the entire song. Coffey pounced Evans with a shoulder tackle into the steel steps. Williams got the hot tag, hitting a flapjack and a kick butt. He did Booker T's head shake and hit a double bookend. Evans did a springboard nothing because either he slipped or Mark was too far away. Joe grabbed the NXT title, so Red stole it back from him with Javon hitting a huge tope before Williams added trick shot and got the win. Red brought him the title. They all raised hands, and that brought out Legend in the overrun to confront Trick. So Lash and Sexy, they slapped hands before Legend demanded honesty. Williams was set to answer when all of a sudden the lights go out, they come back on, and Ethan Page, of all people, is attacking Trick from behind. Vic Joseph said, "Book, wasn't he an AE?" And then trailed off, which was actually kind of unnecessary, but whatever. Page also yelled, "Whoop that Trick, I'm about to." Great line. Page didn't get much of a reaction initially, and that's largely because if you just see a guy run in who looks like him, he's very difficult to tell apart from pretty much anyone else. It could have been Sean Spears. It could have been whomever. Eventually, once you got to see his face on camera, then you're like, oh, okay, that's Ethan Page. But he didn't get that like huge pop immediately. And also, he's brand new to the WWE audience. So there's probably a lot of people there who legitimately did not know who he is. When he left AEW, I believe I said that I would love for him to get a shot in NXT because he is the perfect type of wrestler from a veteran standpoint that can help this roster. Much in the vein of LA Knight. The guy can talk, he can work, and he can help them do business. Now, everything about these segments worked, starting with the backstage, moving into the main event. Red was fun. Trick and Javon really worked well together. Gallus was actually great across the board, which I don't normally say. The only thing I disliked, in fact, was the lights going out. If you're a spooky character, fine. If you're Sean Spears even, okay, maybe. A regular dude showing up to attack, just come out of the crowd. We don't have to do lights out shit for everything. AEW overdoes it. Here in NXT, first time I can remember them doing it for a nonsensical reason. It just doesn't need to happen all the time. Again, if you're spooky, it's cool. If you're not, don't do it. Anyway, it was an awesome surprise at the end of NXT. As I said, the track is laid out for Ethan Page to be a huge star on this brand and possibly make a run to the main roster in a couple of years. He's always had the charisma and the in-ring talent. He never got the opportunity he was promised when he signed with AEW. You saw flashes of what he could do when he was given chances, but it never came together. They kept signing people over him. They did their flavor of the month booking. They kept moving him around. He was in that American Top Team stable with Men of the Year for no reason. It was just odd and frustrating. This also comes at a time where NXT has needed main event talent, losing Braun Breaker, Ilya Dragunov, Dijak to a degree, Carmelo Hayes, all to the main roster. If you think back during NXT Black and Gold in the heyday, people would get called up. All of a sudden, new people would debut, a Kevin Owens, for example. That's the way I see Ethan Page in this type of situation. If all goes well, he will not be there long. But if he is there for a year, 18 months, he's going to help NXT massively. And I would not be surprised if he's the person to take the NXT title off Trick Williams, either now or soon. Now, he tweeted after the show that he's not signed with any company. That's bullshit. He has signed with WWE. I can confirm that. It's an outsider angle they're running where he's done this without being signed and he's going to force their hand to bring him aboard. That's pretty much what they're doing. As far as the metaphor attacks being faked, I clearly got that wrong. But terrible acting jobs by Noam Dar and Oro Mensah for me to think that way. Either that or they wanted us to think they were fake. Then they were great acting jobs because I got fooled. But I feel like I was spot on with Paige coming over as a good idea, even though, just to be clear, I had zero idea that it was actually happening. Wes Lee backstage was upset that he has to share his spotlight for the North American Championship match with Coffey, and he acknowledged that Gallus is coming for all the gold, but said that would be problematic given he's winning the North American title. Obafemi came up saying the number of opponents is irrelevant because the outcome of him retaining the title will remain the same no matter how many people he's fighting. This was decent overall. This did remind me of something that I kind of glossed over in the last segment while I was praising everything that happened. Gallus, or really more Joe Coffey in particular, attacked Trick last week, didn't he? So you have Noam Dar trying to go after Trick. He got taken out. Then you had Joe Coffey randomly go after him, despite the fact that he was already in the North American title match. Now, that did lead to the tag team match that we got this week on NXT. But if you're going after the champion, that generally means you want a title match. So now that's kind of been overshadowed by Ethan Page. So I'm just kind of curious if the Coffey thing was dropped, if it was a 1 week situation and they were waiting to sign Ethan Page. Maybe it was going to be Coffey as the attacker. And then when they got Page on the dotted line, they changed it. They had alternate plans. I'm kind of curious to find out some of that background, but I did wonder about that coming out of this segment. Lola Vice was shadowboxing backstage with Ariana Grace asking her to reconsider the NXT Underground match because it's dangerous and unnecessary. Lola didn't like Ariana calling out Shayna Baszler as a real cage fighter, saying she was one as well, so she challenged her to a match. Realizing what she did, Grace dropped a legit "oh shit" that got bleeped out. Really fun segment. Lola later beat Ariana in 2 minutes, catching her with a spinning back fist to the chest. The most interesting part of this match, and one of our listeners actually pointed out, I want to give him a shout out, Racine at Last, at Racine at Last. There was a moment where Booker T and Vic Joseph kind of got contentious together on commentary. And Vic made a comment, "Hey, Book, you can't even stand up right now without people seeing how excited you are," which I thought that was very funny of a comment for him to make during the show. The other thing that was kind of notable here is the Ariana Grace, Gigi Dolan storyline seems to be completely dropped at this point. And really, Dolan has not been used much, really since the end of Toxic Attraction. I was trying to remember the name of the group. Now, she was used. I'm not saying she consistently wasn't used, but it has been literally inconsistent, where sometimes she's involved in something, then she's quickly not, but she's still one of the most experienced women in this entire division right now. And it's starting to feel, and I have no information on this, so please don't take this as a report or anything. It's just starting to feel like she might be gone, or she might be leaving NXT. Maybe there's something else happening. There was a family issue or a personal issue or a health issue, knock on wood. Hopefully it's none of those things. But nothing with her seems to ever reach completion. She doesn't really seem to get opportunities like for titles or in tournaments or anything like that. She's used sparingly. She has a great look. She can speak pretty well. She can work pretty well. I would say if if we're going to be fair about her, expectations were pretty high when she got signed, and the reality of her in NXT has disappointed just compared to those expectations. But at the same time, maybe there's something going on that we just don't know about. Now, I understood this match being a squash. It was appropriately one, but it's still disappointing when it happens. Vice later threatened Baszler, saying she'd tap her out or knock her out. Bitch. Shayna stormed the ring, but security intercepted them before they could even touch. It was kind of fire, with Baszler like screaming at the top of her lungs that she was born in the underground and she would take her down there. I thought it was pretty cool. Idris Enofe and Malik Blade fought the Good Brothers backstage before the match. The OC promised the beatdowns would continue until they get their tag team title opportunity. Carl Anderson then yelled into the camera, basically calling the champions cowards. Enofe got pounced by Blade into Brenly Reese, knocking her down ringside. He later got a hot tag where he did a really cool drop kick and hand thrust, like combination, taking out two guys at once. You'd see that like in an action movie or something Jackie Chan would do. Idris ultimately missed a high-risk move, eating a chokeslam from Luke Gallows plus Magic Killer in the finish. Nathan Frazier and Axiom attacked after the bell, with Frazier saying they aren't getting anywhere near the titles as long as they're champions, and then Axiom interrupted and offered them a match. Now, this actually went a little bit longer than I expected, and it was a decent look for Enofe and Blade. I'm just not sure what to think about Malik. I know Idris has personality, his look, he has ability. They work as a team. I don't know if that's going to last long term. I hope I'm wrong. Good Brothers getting the win. That was obvious because it's going to lead into the title match at Battleground. Plus, Enofe and Blade never win anyway. The Frazier promo was confusing, and Axiom kind of didn't save it. He almost made it more confusing. But overall, it was a pretty decent post-match that was hot and got the fans excited. Riley Osborne fought Ridge Holland, dominating early. Ridge told Chase U he didn't want to do this. Osborne kept him outside with some kicks over and through the ropes, but Holland intercepted a tope suicida with a forearm. He went to grab the steel steps when Thea Hale stopped him, and ultimately he beat Osborne clean with the Redeemer Cradle DDT finisher. Ridge lifted Riley up and offered a hand. He refused to shake and left the ring. Osborne backstage got admonished by Chase U for not shaking hands. Duke Hudson said he kind of understood why, and he walked away with Riley while Thea lost her shit about it, and Chase kind of just looked flummoxed. I'm curious to see where this is going storyline-wise, because Osborne is kind of just being an asshole for no good reason at this point. And I don't exactly know why Hudson would agree when all Holland is doing, and we're seeing it in front of us with our eyes, is trying not to be a bad person and even listening in this spot to Thea and not using the steel steps against this guy, and yet still beat him clean. So what is there to be upset about? Dante Chen got a video promo package where he talked about being in the background all these years in NXT, only for it now to be his opportunity to represent his family and Singapore by making something of himself. Other random faces were cheering him on backstage when Lexus King came in, spoiling the party, saying it was a fluke win last week, it'll never happen again. So Chen stood tall, he challenged him, and they got an immediate rematch. We also saw Sean Spears chatting it up with Out the Mud in the background of the segment, and then later we saw him talking to Tyreek Igwe and Tyson DuPont in a separate segment. So Chen and King, Lexus taunted him early and hit a nice jackhammer, but Chen caught him in a crucifix pinning combination for a very quick upset win. King snapped and dragged him ringside with a drive-by elbow to the back of the head. Then he ripped up the padding and he hit the coronation, but he hit the coronation on the folded padding. So basically, he stood on the wrong part of it, and the move was twice as safe as opposed to being twice as dangerous. They just completely botched that. Chen was laid out looking dead. For some reason, Mr. Stone was nowhere to be found after having his back last week. And then we found out Stone was there. So it even made less sense, the fact that he didn't come out. I didn't feel like this progressed much. Maybe it's only week 2 of a longer story, but I don't know. We'll see where this is going. Josh Briggs got a video package where he was all clean cut watching footage on a projector of his time with Brooks Jensen and Fallon Henley. He talked about finding a little brother and a little sister to help him grow, then finding some single success, but basically being lost. His plan was to find out who he is. Spears enjoyed watching this, calling Briggs another lost soul in search of guidance. Spears said there was one person in particular that he saw needed help, and this would be his new mission. He had this like psychotic look on his face while saying all this, not as psychotic as like continuing to wear the pale colored vest without a shirt underneath, but psychotic nonetheless. The Briggs part was extremely solid. The guy can talk and work. He's got a high ceiling. The Spears part, it's a wait and see. Charlie Dempsey was bothered while No Quarter Catch crew were training, saying he needed to win the Heritage Cup back. Dempsey insisted that they need to run their crew like Tony D'Angelo runs his family, with structure and discipline. Miles Bourne offered to take out one of the family next week. Dempsey decided it would be Damon Kemp instead. They got into a whole thing where Dempsey tried to teach them how to say capiche. D'Angelo family later decided that nothing else can be accomplished until they fully take care of the crew. They decided to beat them at their own game, and that's kind of odd for Dempsey to want to turn his group into a mafia family. I'm here to find out what this is going to be eventually. Maybe it's a situation where someone comes in to lead no quarter. Maybe that person, I don't know, is his father, William Regal. That could make a lot of sense, but I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do, and that's kind of me just speculating and throwing out some bullshit there. I thought we were done with this. Apparently not. I do actually think Dempsey is a more interesting leader than Drew Gulak ever was, but really the whole gimmick of doing a faction was based on Gulak's leadership. So I'm not exactly sure how this is going to go. Eddie Thorpe got a return vignette saying he's been reborn through fire. We also got an introduction package for Carly Bright, a former Minnesota cheerleader. What's funny is that I think I said last week she looked like a cheerleader trying to wrestle. I had no idea that was actually her deal and she was really a cheerleader. What's cool is that Minnesota let WWE use a bunch of footage of her. We also saw Natalya, that she was being kind to her backstage. Izzy Dame came up being rude with Carmen Petrovic standing up to her. Izzy towered over all of these other women by at least a foot, most of them, some more. It was crazy to see how large she was in comparison to the rest. And I'm including Natalya in that, and Carmen Petrovic, who did not look that small just going out to the ring, but apparently next to Izzy Dame. Maybe it was the camera angle, but it was pretty crazy. So that largely wraps up NXT. I was happy, by the way, to see that Natalya is still down there working with them. I hope that is long-term. I do have one quick news item with NXT before we move on. It looks like Brooks Jensen may have been released by WWE, at least according to his social media. At first, I thought he had been running some type of angle over the last few weeks. He's been tweeting pictures of beer and alcohol while watching NXT on TV. And then he had a couple posts about not being welcomed to an NXT Fort Pierce show, literally not getting let in. And then sitting in the crowd during an edition of NXT Level Up, suggesting he had snuck into the Performance Center. And he's also been tweeting a ton of pictures of alcohol, talking about drinking 10, 12 beers in a sitting. That's obviously not a good look. Just a strange turn of events overall. I hope the guy is okay in the end, no matter the situation. The reason I don't think it's an angle is even if WWE was going to show someone having a couple drinks, I don't think they would promote binge drinking and alcoholism. And that's kind of what, that's what drinking 10 or 12 beers in a sitting, taking shots to the extent he was in these photos, and doing some of the things that he's doing, that's what that would be. Now, maybe it is all work, and he comes back, and that's great, because certainly we don't want anyone losing their job. But we've long talked about the futures of the members of this group, how I thought Josh Briggs and Fallon Henley had high ceilings, and Jensen just really did not. I take no pleasure in that seemingly playing out here. But it's also just not that surprising if that's the case when all is said and done. Again, could be a work. Unfortunately, does seem legit. One other item before we get to AEW. In terms of ratings this week, NXT impressed, going 703,000 viewers with a 0.24 demo. That's the highest demo for them since January 2nd this year, and the fourth highest, get this, since October 28th, 2020. It's double what they were doing a year ago at this time. 703,000 viewers was also just the highest total since January 9th, so clearly the Sexy Red promotion, that worked. What's interesting is that this number is literally equal to what AEW did for Dynamite on May 1st, 703, 0.24, and it's better than two of the last four ratings for Dynamite. Last week, AEW did 713,000 and 0.24. So we're talking about a 10,000 viewer difference between Dynamite and NXT. And they're not head-to-head. It's not a beat scenario. It's not a versus scenario. It's just comparatively what AEW did on Wednesday and what NXT did on Tuesday. Now, coming out of a holiday weekend, we're not going to have the Dynamite number on today's show. We'll probably have it Thursday, so we'll most likely tweet about it if it's notable. But I found it notable on its own that NXT was up to 703. That's a raise of 49,000 viewers week over week and a 0.07 demo. That's significant gains in a 1 week span. So notable success for NXT. We will find out perhaps in a little bit greater context what it means Thursday. Twitter @GettingOvercast will tweet it, and then we'll discuss it on next week's show. So with NXT in the books, let's go ahead and move over to AEW. Before we get into everything that happened on Dynamite and a little bit, of course, of Collision and Rampage, I wanted to do a very brief second look at AEW Double or Nothing and discuss a few news items coming out before we get to that breakdown. Watching it back, the Swerve Strickland Christian Cage match, that house call counter, it was the singular spot, best spot of the entire show. And I reiterate what I said Sunday. All wrestlers, especially in AEW, but everywhere, they need to start ending matches on the best moves. You don't want to hit a best move, have someone kick out, then have to do 3 or 4 more moves or 3 or 4 more minutes, and then just get a regular finisher. It's not as exciting. More matches need to get ended in sudden fashion. That house call spot should have ended that match. Now, Adam Copeland announced Tuesday that he broke his tibia jumping off the top of the cage in the match against Malachi Black. He said he got cocky and needs to make better choices at his age. And I got to say, being 50 had nothing to do with this. It seemed like he panicked and did not jump properly, deciding almost once he left his feet to do something else than what he had planned. But really, and I cannot count how many times we've said this about AEW, there seems to be no adult in the room. Nobody in that company that is willing to say, no, this is stupid, this is dangerous, you should not be doing this. The last one who did apparently was CM Punk, and that led to the whole Real Glass Crimea River situation. He eventually got into a tussle with Jack Perry, and then he got fired. Now, between the Brood stuff, Gangrel, and the cage jump, Copeland was basically allowed to do whatever he wanted in this match. And it's pretty much the way any named wrestler gets to operate in AEW. There was no reason for him to do this jump. It was not even the conclusion of the match. And I think anyone watching this live knew as soon as he started climbing, this is not going to end well. Now he suffered his 3rd or 4th, I'm losing count, major injury since his initial return to WWE. And it's great that some of these guys, and it's not just Copeland, CM Punk, Sting, others, are able to wrestle Billy Gunn at these later ages. But there's a reason why these guys are getting injured so frequently. It's because they're older. Sting somehow avoided that. Good for him. He was very protective and careful with himself. But it seems like Copeland has been an immensely positive influence backstage in AEW. And if he continues to be that, then perhaps he can start by setting an example for talent of risks worth taking versus risks not worth taking, as we discussed with Will Ospreay and that ridiculous Doomsday move he did with Kingdom on this same show. Now, speaking of injuries, Eddie Kingston's basically going to be out for a calendar year after badly hurting his knee during an awful barricade table spot during an NJPW Strong show. One wonders whether this will affect AEW's perspective of allowing talent to not only work non-AEW shows, but do matches like this at non-AEW shows. Not that Kingston was the most key piece to the puzzle, but he's obviously a fan favorite, and now he's lost for a year at an advanced age where he probably only has so many more years to go. Mark Henry, Arn Anderson, and Jake Hager will all have their AEW contracts expire pretty much the day after this show publishes, May 31st. With Hager, even for a guy who was there to fill out a faction, he was booked like shit. He basically never won anything, despite getting over with the hack gimmick especially. Not that he has any major value, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying he was never given a shot. I said this when he was signed, but it always felt like it was done simply because it was another recognizable former WWE guy that if you tuned into AEW, you could say, oh, I know that dude. And that's not really the worst reason to sign someone. In fact, at that juncture, I don't know that I disagreed with it. I probably said it was a good idea. I also thought he'd be used a little bit better, and he wasn't. Now, Big Bill has kind of filled in his role recently, and some. Hopefully, he will continue to get booked better. Though as of right now, he's not that dissimilar being the heavy for Chris Jericho, but at least he was a tag team champion alongside Ricky Starks beforehand. Arn Anderson, look, I don't have any desire to see him in WWE, but I have a feeling Triple H likes him, and we certainly know Cody Rhodes likes him. So if there's a situation where he can come in and manage or help Cody train or something in an angle, I would not be surprised if that happens. I just don't particularly want it myself. Mark Henry, I never understood why AEW signed him in the first place. The whole gimmick with this is the main event for Rampage, okay, that was kind of fun, but you don't pay someone 6 figures or however much he was making just to pretty much do that. And I don't know that he made any major contributions there. So I don't see anything happening with him in WWE. If they wanted to sign him and put him on pre-show panels or have him guest on the bump and just do a Legends contract, sure, he definitely deserves that. But I don't really think there's anything else for him there beyond that. I also wanted to discuss AEW's media rights situation. But you know what? We only have so much time today, and that's something worth breaking down in a more detailed way. So we're going to do that on buymeacoffee.com/gettingover this coming Friday. A little bit of a tease for our news update. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Chad Gable's contract, maybe a little Becky Lynch as well. So be sure to sign up, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. With that, let's move fully into the AEW week in review. We're going to discuss everything that happened on Dynamite, along with incidents from Rampage and Collision that did not make our AEW Double or Nothing instant analysis. We did cover a lot of that there because some of it was direct build to Double or Nothing. So moving to Dynamite, Swerve Strickland fought Killswitch in a non-title match. This was a House of Dragons sponsored match with Swerve fighting the tertiary member of the faction whose leader he just beat Sunday. But there was a reason for this match. We'll find that out in a second. Killswitch went to bash Swerve's head into the ring apron with a chair until Prince Nana eventually remembered to run up and pull it away. He countered House Call with a chokeslam and a standing moonsault. Swerve then hit a German suplex and House Call, adding a Swerve stomp for a false finish. I shit you not. So then Swerve hit House Call seconds later a second time, and he got the win. After the bell, Swerve used scissors to cut what camera showed us was a fake ponytail as revenge for when his braid got pulled out weeks ago. It was literally like on a rubber band, and Swerve cut it, and you just looked at it and you're like, this is the fakest thing I've ever seen. The in-ring work was immensely strong here. Swerve needing 3 finishers to beat a mid-carder who never wins shit was absolutely ridiculous. Perhaps they could have done 2 house calls in succession without a kick out. That would have made it smoother. But beyond that, as I've said before, House Call is a far superior finisher to Swerve Stomp. The Stomp requires an opponent awkwardly sitting up for no reason whatsoever, only for Swerve to jump and land with his feet on the canvas, basically never touching them. The House Call can come out of nowhere. It comes with a slap sound for impact, and it looks devastating because it's a kick to the head. It's a 9 out of 10 finisher. The Swerve Stomp is a 5 out of 10. That should be nothing more than a setup move, and it should only be used when appropriate, when someone is randomly sitting up, and then Swerve can do it, as opposed to trying to fit it into every single match. On Dynamite, there was a Forbidden Door Casino Gauntlet match. The winner of this was set to fight Swerve for the AEW title at Forbidden Door next month. Tony Schiavone literally screamed early in the show that this match was sudden death, as if it was some like the most exciting thing in the entire world. Now, let me say, the match was immensely exciting, but it wasn't because Tony Schiavone screamed that it's sudden death. And I'm going to use this opportunity to remind all of you, this is not a gauntlet match by any definition of the term. A gauntlet requires going through multiple challengers in succession and coming out on the other side as the winner. This is basically an untimed scramble to a fall. It's a totally fine match concept. It's not just a fine concept. It's a great match concept. But again, it's not a gauntlet. And really, AEW should actually just come up with its own unique name for it. Make it a signature match. Then you don't have to worry about it being called something it's not or calling it something that it is. Just make it your own thing. Use this opportunity. But I digress. Swerve had a brief backstage promo before in which he didn't say much of anything, but he pointed out the talent in the match was high quality. So Jay White, Pac, Mystico, and Will Ospreay were the first 4, which is quite a 4 to start pretty much any match. Shota Umino from New Japan was next. He and Ospreay were great together. Claudio Castagnoli swung everyone in the match during commercial, including almost doing it to the referee. Leo Rush showed up, smells like money. Then Orange Cassidy with a head injury got to join the match. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Ospreay chose not to catch Cassidy blind with Hidden Blade for some reason, I guess because he's a babyface. White then dumped Will on his head with a snap German suplex. Hechicero was next and last, completely fired out of a cannon running to the ring. Mystico had 2 superb Hurricanranas on Claudio, including a springboard one outside. Cassidy caught Umino with Orange Punch. Juice Robinson, who was not even in the match, again prevented Black Arrow on White. Ospreay prevented Blade Runner. Orange impressively countered Stormbreaker midair, but Ospreay hit Ozcutter on him for the 1-2-3 to win. And then Swerve came out immediately after the bell to stare down Ospreay. Let's start with the match, which was excellent and an absolute blast. Perfect TV main event, tremendous action, some legitimate surprises, and a hot enough finish. Easily the best part of the show. One of the best things AEW put on all week, and I say that again reminding, they had a pay-per-view. And this is all, of course, despite the convoluted stipulation and name, that's whatever. I have this at 4.25 stars and an A simply because it was awesome in ring, but there was no other element to it. I'm a huge fan of this match concept in pretty much every way. I will repeat for the last time, except it being called a gauntlet. And also, shout out to Hechicero, who is massively impressive every single time he gets in a ring. The guy can do so much so quickly, it is crazy. But now let's talk about the booking. So the guy who just won his first title on this brand 72 hours earlier. Number one had an opportunity to challenge for the AEW title, but he actually won the opportunity to challenge for the AEW title. And he's doing it on a dual brand show. And I just don't understand why. Now, if Jon Moxley still has the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship and he's going to fight another New Japan talent on this card, okay, that's going to make some sense. And I also enjoy the fact that they're going AEW, AEW, and maybe NJPW, NJPW, because otherwise, if you have challengers from the other brands, the outcomes are always completely predictable. Plus, you can do brand versus brand matches through the rest of the entire card. Now, we're going to have to wait and see on that. But the question is why Ospreay is being put in this spot. There's only a few booking options that make sense. But no matter what the move, it's fair to question the decision to run this so soon. Here are the options. Option 1, Ospreay wins the AEW title and unifies it with the international title. That despite it recently being leveled up thanks to Shazam Fury of the Gods. Now, if you do that, you're completely marginalizing Swerve as the first black AEW champion. You're making him a total transitional champion with a real short reign and one successful defense. You're also getting rid of the best of the 3 men's mid-card titles, at least in my opinion. I think International is better than TNT and Continental, certainly better than Continental. Option 2 is Swerve beating Will Clean. That's huge for Swerve, but then Ospreay loses for no reason against a guy he did not need to face before he even gets a chance to defend the title that he's won 3 days ago. He actually will be defending it now that I think about it on Collision, but it's a thrown together match against a challenger who is certainly not going to win. We'll talk about that again later too. So that would be nonsensical to do option 2. Option 3 is the Don Callis family screws Ospreay because he won't listen to Don about using the Tiger Driver 91 and trying to kill his opponent. That would make sense in kayfabe, but what is the payoff to that? He's already fought the entire family for no reason whatsoever, I remind you, in those random matches. Any one of those could have been saved and used if this was going to be the booking for this match. The only person he hasn't fought is the newest member of the Don Callis family. Again, we'll talk about that in a moment. But that person is hardly a good reason to book this. And then option 4 is that Hangman Page returns and he screws Swerve out of the title. That also makes total sense. But the payoff would be a non-title match, which we've already seen 3 or 4 times between these two guys. Point being, there are 4 different options for booking here, and all of them are problematic in different ways. So I just don't get this, but maybe it will be explained soon. All that said, we have a month until the show, so there's plenty of time for this to crystallize. And I'll repeat, this was easily the best thing on the entire episode of Dynamite. It feels just rife with problems. And it's even more confusing when you consider that All In is just a couple months away, and this could have been run on that show. Now, maybe they'll rematch it there. Seems unnecessary to give it away the first time if you're going to do that. Other options for that show are Ospreay against Bryan Danielson as a rematch. There's also the Danielson-Nigel McGuinness match that seems to be making a lot of sense based on the trash talk that he's been delivering. Maybe Hangman Page wins the Owen and fights Swerve for the title if he still has it by that show. Now we're getting into a bunch of speculation on top of speculation. The point is made, though. It's a little bit confusing the way they're doing this. I don't really see an out that makes all the sense in the world, but let's see what happens going forward. On Collision, Kyle O'Reilly beat someone named KM in 70 seconds. On Dynamite, Daniel Garcia backstage with Daddy Magic said he feels stuck and he's ready to do what it takes to go after the international title. He promised to climb up the rankings and take the strap from Ospreay respectfully. Extremely solid promo from Garcia. Stated a clear intent, came across as legitimate rather than manufactured. My only issue has nothing to do with Garcia. Seconds before this promo, AEW announced that Kyle O'Reilly would get a title match Saturday. So you have O'Reilly, who just lost a TNT title match 18 days ago, being granted another different title match with his only wins in between coming against Lee Moriarty, who everyone beats, and KM, who nobody knows. Oh, don't forget, he also fought for the international title 38 days ago and lost a number 1 contendership 3 days after that. So again, why is he getting a 3rd title match and a 4th title opportunity in 41 days? And why does Garcia have to grind for it when O'Reilly's getting them handed to him despite him being out of action for pretty much 2 years? And now you have Ospreay, who's working 2 deals at the same time. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, honestly. On Dynamite, Mercedes Moné opened the show with a championship celebration and a real chant for a change. Quick point of order here. For someone calling herself the CEO, someone whose name is Monet as a takeoff of money, this was the shittiest celebration I have ever seen. It was some red and gold balloons just kind of like thrown across the canvas. It looked like Dwight Schrute and Jim Halpert put on this party. I mean, it almost looked like someone went to the dollar store, grabbed some balloons and said, this is good enough. And this is not a nitpick because of her gimmick. It matters, her name, her gimmick. And this is the championship celebration for Mercedes Monet, where Monet changes everything. Balloons on a canvas. Anyway, she put over Willow Nightingale, but said she's way too nice, and it's obvious her friends were going to screw her over. It had been obvious the entire time. Then Mercedes said she hopes Willow kicks their asses when Sky Blue interrupted on the big screen, and she took credit for the attack in the dark 2 months ago. Then she attacked from behind with a TKO and put her knee on Monet's throat while holding up the TBS title. So let me get this straight. AEW ran a story for more than a month of Monet being a heel, only to now portray her as a babyface here without doing anything to actually turn her. Are you telling me the video package where Mercedes compares herself to Rosa Parks and Amelia Earhart, among others, was her being a face? How do you go from that to kick her ass, girly? Between the random pauses in the promo to dance and taking the CEO chance and another lacking promo from Mercedes, only to wind up with an opponent who has never been booked strong to this point in her entire career, this was pretty disappointing. The positive is that she was over, and it was far from her worst promo. But this was not a good idea to put her in the ring solo with a mic unless you cannot avoid it. It felt like this should have been more aggressive, saying, now that I am holding the TBS title, I want to know who the hell attacked me weeks ago. Show yourself. Why was she not on the warpath to find this out? Why did it take Sky on her own saying, oh, hey, you're enjoying your celebration? Remember that time that you got your ass kicked and you never did anything about it? It was me. Like, what are we doing? And if you're going to do the celebration at all, maybe they should have taped it like at a club and put some production value into it. So there's champagne popping and there's bottle service and everyone's going crazy. And then she gets attacked there. Think about how much more interesting this would have been if that happened. She realizes it's Sky Blue and then challenges her for the title match on Dynamite. You're talking night and day between the two. I digress again. TBS Championship, Monet against Blue. Now, this was announced as part of the show 30 minutes into Dynamite. Originally advertised all day was a women's match, Mariah May against Saraya. So this seemed to have been a replacement for one reason or another. Mercedes countered a powerbomb with a Hurricanrana. Then Sky basically hit an inverted version of Mercedes' finisher. Then she countered Code Blue with Monet Maker for the win. It was probably the best version of Monet Maker that she's hit since debuting it like 2 years ago. But, whatever, it was a short match. Now, given the attack in the dark, one would have thought this would have gotten built up as like a more legitimate feud. It was a sneak attack that Mercedes sold as a significant injury. If they weren't going to dig deeper into that story, then okay, at least Monet beat her quickly, but it feels like they just threw this entire deal away for no reason. I mean, they wrapped it all up in an hour, despite having built to this. Almost as if they forgot about it and were like, oh yeah, by the way, we got to take up this loose end before we move on to the next thing that we're going to talk about. Maybe she can flip it. Another interesting but typical AEW note, Sky has now fought for the TBS title 5 times, and she's lost to every single TBS champion that has existed. And all of that's come in the last 16 months. On Dynamite, there was a random video package showing clips of Stephanie Vaquer, who is the CMLL Women's Champion and the NJPW Strong Women's Champion. Lasted about 30 seconds, and at the end, a question was posed as to how she will be involved at Forbidden Door. Now, we talk about wanting AEW to introduce unfamiliar talent, but this was almost basically putting the cart before the horse, right? It gave the viewer an extremely basic understanding of who she is, but it was so surface level that you barely learned anything other than where she came from. And that could have been accomplished exactly the same way by Excalibur saying, oh my God, it's Stephanie Vaquer of CMLL and New Japan. Then, after Mercedes' title retention, Stephanie came out and held up only the NJPW Strong title for some reason, and it makes it seem like they may go title versus title at Forbidden Door. So not only did the video come without context, it completely ruined the surprise of the appearance because it happened on the same show. The way to do this, okay, if you're trying to execute this, is you promote it during the week on social media. And you say, she is going to be on Dynamite, and you do that with that produced video package. Here's who she is. Then you show that on TV before she comes out. She comes out, and you put an effort into an angle. You have her be teased during the show. Why is Stephanie Vaquer at Dynamite? What does she have to say? Then she comes out and cuts her spiel and says, I want to challenge Mercedes Moné. You wanted the NJPW Strong title. I want the TBS title. Let's put them on the line at Forbidden Door. Instead, this was basically the laziest way AEW could have done this, just so they could say, see, we told you who she was before she came out. That's real disappointing. Also, the Excalibur voiceover was horrendous as part of this video. Now, all that said, the Mercedes Vaquer match is going to be great. Their first one was a banger. I wouldn't be surprised to see Mercedes walk out of this as double champion, becoming the NJPW Strong Women's Champion. She was supposed to be when she broke her ankle, and then again, Willow took that match. But if you're going to book it well. This was, again, as lazy and basic as they possibly could have done it. And that's why I'm criticizing it. Not because of the booking, not because it's someone who's not in AEW. I don't care about that. It's fine that Stephanie's there. They're doing a Forbidden Door show. They need other women to show up to fight the women. Like, it makes all the sense in the world. But execute it well. Put as much effort into this as you would put into a men's storyline. And that is the frustrating part. Although, to be fair, the way AEW has been booked recently, even if this were two men, I don't know that it would have been booked any better. On Rampage, Roosh beat Isaiah Cassidy in 9 minutes with Bull's Horns. Cassidy has now lost across 4 straight weeks, and he's 2-10 on the year, with both wins being in tag team matches. And this actually reminds me, I started talking about AEW, and I didn't even do my breakdown of like which matches had storyline relevance this week. Well, there were 14 matches on AEW television. That's down from the normal 18. 29%, so 4 out of 14, which is right around the normal average, had storyline relevance. And that's me including the random number 1 contendership from Dynamite because it actually had a reason for happening. I'm also including the TBS title match because there was a reason for that happening as well. So the numbers really were not good. But why did I mention Roosh at this part of the show? Well, I'll tell you. On Dynamite, MJF got a video package with a random voice saying his return at Double or Nothing marked the continuation of his legacy. It was basically just a list of all of his AEW accomplishments interlaced with clips from Double or Nothing. And there was also a confirmation that he signed with AEW long term. Now, this is the first Dynamite since his return. They had like 6,000 or more people there. So a pretty good crowd. It was in Los Angeles. And he's not booked for the show. So why do you have him return on Double or Nothing if you're not going to try to draw for TV by putting your top guy on your show, especially when this edition of Dynamite was against limited sports competition? Only the lesser of the 2 NHL playoff series were airing on Wednesday. No NBA games. This was a total failure. And fans actually booed when a graphic popped up showing that MJF was not going to be on TV until next week. So they deserve this one.
0.0.
That is one big pile of shit.
On Dynamite, the Elite came out with Kazuchika Okada saying, "Shut up, bitches." So he got an Okada chant, and I laughed at it. I thought it was pretty funny. Jack Perry said, "The Elite run this shit." So 2 light curses in 30 seconds. Really edgy stuff, guys. Perry bragged about pinning Bryan Danielson. The Young Bucks bragged about their Reebok pumps being the best-selling Reebok shoe in years, shocking no one because no one buys Reeboks for style in 2024. Also, these shoes were $180 and ugly as sin. If you bought them, I mean, I want to know. DM me. Tell me that you bought these shoes. Then they pointed to the big screen as a black Lamborghini drove up as a gift for Okada. I thought they already gave him a red one. He fake cried. Then they got fans to chant, "You deserve it." The Bucks then announced that Adam Copeland was being stripped of the TNT title, with commentary saying, "This is a travesty because he should have at least been given a chance to relinquish it." I mean, I guess that's fair, but it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The guy's not going to be champion anymore. So it wasn't the most heelish thing that these guys could have done. Anyway, to be heels, the Bucks then announced Perry was going to just be the new TNT champion, only for Christopher Daniels to show up, saying he had been rehired by Tony Khan as an interim EVP, and his announcements would come from Tony himself. Daniels said AEW is where the best wrestle, and therefore the title will be awarded after a series of qualifying matches leading to a ladder match at Forbidden Door. He then said the first match would happen on Friday Night Dynamite, which is not a real show. The Elite went to attack, so Acclaimed came down, and for some reason they're getting CDs back. Quite a foursome seeing those guys together. Now, obviously, I'm already sharing some sarcasm here, but that's because the segment deserved it. If you are truly enjoying this storyline, I want you to DM us at GettingOvercast or email us gettingoverpod@gmail.com, and I want you to tell me why. And I will read it right here on the show. I say that because this was straight up painful and, again, completely illogical. If Tony is back at TV, as we literally fucking saw Saturday and Sunday, Why does he need someone to speak for him when he's never needed that before in the 5-year history of AEW? Why is CD's title interim EVP? Make him commissioner or general manager or whatever the case. If he's going to be speaking for Tony, that doesn't mean he needs to be an EVP. Is he in the place of Kenny Omega, who has made one match in his entire AEW career? And that was, by the way, in the absence of Tony. The Elite's hostile takeover, it failed. They won the match, Anarchy in the Arena, but they failed to take control of AEW. They tried to take out Tony. He's back. What else is there for them to do? That's just the facts. And yes, if you were briefly confused, thinking Daniels looked like Adam Pearce, I promise you were not the only one. I had to do a double take. Dude looked like a great value version. He was wearing a dress shirt and all that type of stuff. I did like the continuity of him being used in the role. But again, the storyline is so weak and it is so illogical that it's actually painful to watch it on television every single week, especially in major spots on the show. One more thing, and please understand me clearly when I say this. AEW is not copying WWE. At least I don't think they are. But there has been an immense amount of irony, how many coincidences there have been from the booking standpoint recently. And we've pointed this out. There were 2 more, actually 3 more now that I think about it, on Dynamite. 2 different title versus title or champion versus champion matches, just like WWE just had a Blood Money in the Sand. Now they're doing qualifying matches for a ladder match to crown a champion for a vacant title, just like WWE is doing at NXT Battleground. Now, this is all regular course of wrestling booking. This is nothing odd. Again, they are not copying WWE, but it's the proximity to WWE and the fact that every time AEW has one of these announcements, it's coming after WWE has already announced it or done it that makes it so ironic and interesting. I think it's coincidental and a lot of coincidence that Tony Khan is probably angered by or bothered by that it's happening, but it is nevertheless happening. So I found that to be notable. On Dynamite, Jon Moxley fought Rocky Romero in an IWGP World Heavyweight Championship eliminator match. Mox said he took the match because fighting is what champions do. Commentary was pretty unhinged during this. Taz legitimately got hot at Tony. It was weird. Mox hit a cutter, then ate a tornado DDT. Romero escaped a choke and snapped Mox's arm. Then Mox hit a lariat and Death Rider using one arm for the win. Seems like he's going to be dropping this title sooner than later, probably because of the arm, maybe at Dominion, early June, if not Forbidden Door, late June. That all depends on the challengers. The match was fine, but look, this was Romero's 7th AEW match in the last 39 days. All that talent on the roster, sitting, doing nothing. And Romero has been given 7 matches, including 2 title eliminators and a contender match. And he's lost all of them. What sense does this make? Why would he go from international to FTW to IWGP World Heavyweight? Why does he keep getting eliminators when he keeps losing them? I cannot make any sense of this. On Rampage, Samoa Joe squashed a jobber in 80 seconds before this. He said in a promo that he's been stacking wins. That's not true. Since losing the title, he beat this jobber and Cassidy. That's it. On Dynamite, there was a new segment, TV Time with Chris Jericho. This was a new talk show segment set up like the highlight reel from WWE, but with a cartoon fake tree and grass on the ground. Taz on commentary said it was a shoot that Jericho wants TV time. We got that from the title, dude. Jericho unveiled his new LTU shirt, which looked almost identical to the old SCU shirt for Steve Austin. And I would know because I have 2 of them in my closet. Big Bill was already there, so Jericho welcomed in Brian Keith, who was angry at how Jericho has been disrespected. Bill coined him the Bad Apple. And of course, he's the Redwood, so they're all doing tree-adjacent gimmicks. Hook stormed down with 4 security guards there to stop him. Why? No idea. He beat up 2 as usual. Then Samoa Joe's music hit, but even though his music hit, he was already at the bottom of the ramp. He whispered something to Hook, and then he walked off with Hook following him. Joe and Hook later said they're going to work on their own time, not Jericho's time. Now, the very beginning and very end of this hit for me. Joe mentoring Hook, I think it's pretty solid. The extended middle of this was a total eye roll. Keith has like 0 presence on the mic. The logic of the security and Joe all being ready for Hook to enter, that was immensely lacking. On Dynamite, Don Callis opened hour 2 with a contract for the family. He got a chorus of boos saying it's been a pleasure to scout Orange Cassidy. Cassidy's look and theme completely reverted back to what they were before Double or Nothing. Orange immediately and slowly tore the contract in half. Callis spun him around when Stokely Hathaway came out with Chris Statlander, saying that he hates him. Stat accepted the invitation on behalf of her best friend when suddenly Trent Beretta in an all-black suit attacked Cassidy from behind. Orange bladed. Callis pulled Beretta off, and then Trent opened his arms and they hugged. The best part of this was production doing the quick zoom out camera shot when they hugged. That got a laugh out of me. Then OC got kicked 6 times. Now, obviously, this was immensely telegraphed. That's fine because it's wrestling, and sometimes predictable things are good. The problem was, this wasn't exactly good. It was boring as sin, yet booked to open hour 2. Then you have Stat coming out for the distraction. She's saying Trent's her best friend. But are they on the same side as this? Is it just because they're both heels and Orange is a face, and they used to work with him, so now they both hate him? Why does Stat hate Orange? There's no trend there. Or no line there, I should say. Thread is the word I'm looking for. There's no thread there. And they're not going to be joining the family. So why do they care about Trent joining the family? I don't get that. Then you have the fact that Trent is joining the Don Callis family. Does that make them better? Does that make him more interesting? I would say yes, it makes him more interesting. It doesn't make the family any better. I guess we're going to see. There was a lot of heat for this. That's the positive. But Trent being part of this doesn't excite me about Don Callis. It means Don Callis is going to be on my TV more, which I don't mind him being on screen. I mind him being on screen a lot. And if we're going to end up, I mentioned earlier with Ospreay and maybe the Callis family cost him the Swerve match. If we're going to end up with Ospreay Trent for the international title, that's not exciting. You know, like what are we doing with that? On Dynamite, Stoke and Stat backstage said this turn on Willow had been coming for months, ever since the 4-way when Stat said she wanted to be TV's champion again, and Nightingale didn't listen to her. Stat pointed out that the fans don't care about her when she wants to do things for herself, only when she wants to help everyone else. She said she's more than a woman and done being the protector. Everyone will need protection from her. 2 for 2. Excellent promos from Stoke and Stat here. No notes whatsoever. Probably the second best segment from start to finish on Dynamite. The first, of course, being the non-gauntlet match. On Collision, Claudio Garcia and a mystery partner fought Lance Archer and The Righteous. Commentary told us the partner was a friend of Tony Khan's, and it was Hiroshi Tanahashi getting an enormous pop. Now, that's a good surprise, having Ace randomly show up on Collision, especially now that he's NJPW president. Didn't change the fact that there was no reason for the match or the partnership. Tana hit High Fly Flow and got the win. And then lastly on Collision, Mariah May beat Layla Hirsch in 7 minutes using a pump knee instead of Mayday. During the match, she shoved her breasts in Layla's face, basically doing a motorboat, and she did that as offense, and then started skipping in the ring. I don't believe that shit was even done in the Attitude Era. Like at the low point of the Divas, maybe I misremember. Then she hugged some kids despite the fact that she was a heel. And that wraps up AEW this week. So there was some exciting stuff on Dynamite, some decent stuff coming out of Double or Nothing. I saw people roundly praising Dynamite. I don't get that. I found it to be a mediocre at best show that just had a really, really, really strong main event. Like they closed as hot as they could possibly close. But the rest of the show, I was kind of left just scratching my head at some of the booking decisions. They got a month until Forbidden Door. This is always a rough time of year from a booking standpoint, but they're doing like a pay-per-view every month now. That's frustrating as well. We're going to have to see the way this turns out in a few weeks. But as of right now, not totally loving the build. Again, despite the fact that main event on Dynamite was exceptional. So folks, that wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast, our 600th episode, which is absolutely wild to say. Now, we have 3 more episodes coming next week. We will have your WWE show on Tuesday. We'll be back on Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel, with your NXT Battleground Ultimate Preview and AEW episode. And then that weekend, as soon as NXT Battleground goes off the air, you will, of course, have an instant analysis show. So 3 more shows coming next week. We love putting this performance-enhancing audio into your ear holes right here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. And if you want to thank us for that, well, let me tell you what you can do. You can remember that Getting Over
It's all about Defy.
And you can head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. What you can also do is remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well. For $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, sign up. You will get those instant reaction audios, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling. We're covering Raw, NXT, Dynamite, and SmackDown. And then you will get exclusive news posts every Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter @gettingovercast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights. You can leave questions and comments. You can do submissions for the last word. You can just interact with us, whatever you want. at Getting Overcast on Twitter. Thank you all for listening to the 600th edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. This is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.